If you're well-heeled enough to lock in a sizable sum of money into Hong Kong and keep it there for up to 7 years, the Capital Investment Entrant Scheme Cash Investment for Unlimited Residence could be the programme for you. We won't spend too much time on this. This programme was essentially shut down in January 2015, temporarily postponed, I've come to understand. And the reason why it was postponed were basically two main reasons. The first was that this program was introduced in the wake of SARS, where ostensibly we wanted to attract capital to Hong Kong. And so the Immigration Department thought that because we had a hole in our immigration policy where it was impossible just to invest money, to passively invest I should say, in order to get residents, so they thought, well, if you can put, as it was then, $6.5 million into certain asset classes, including real property at that time, and then 3 or 4 years later they changed it to $10 million and then took real property out of the asset classes. The idea was that you could passively invest and get residents accordingly, rather than needing to, as you had to prior to the introduction of this program, to create an active business and generate jobs and all the rest of that good stuff. They introduced the Capital Investment Entrant Scheme. Problem with the Capital Investment Entrant Scheme was that it was twofold. Firstly, it was never designed for mainlanders to participate in this program. One of the conditions to participate in this program, if you're a mainlander, was that you needed to have permanent residency in a third country in order to qualify for admission under this scheme. That originally anticipated those Chinese who had left China, perhaps gone to the US, started new lives in the US, gone to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all the first world jurisdictions. But in practice, this program was hijacked by countries like Gambia or Guinea-Bissau, where it was possible to go and buy from agents around town permanent residency from programs that were still on the books of some of these countries during the brain drain. You remember the time before the handover? I've been here since 1987, right? So I've been doing immigration all this time. I remember all these weird and wonderful jurisdictions popping up, and in Mongkok and Kowloon Tong and elsewhere, there are all these pop-up shops with all these immigration consultants with curtains put on the bare walls, advertising their ability to go and, well, you've been there. So anyway, there was a number of countries that were still on the books, Gambia being one, and the enterprising folks who still had access to those programs started selling those programs for between $150,000 and $200,000, and you could get in 2 days permanent residency stamped in your passport, and then you could take your permanent residency proof together with, you know, the papers for a Capital Investment Entrant Scheme application if you're a Chinese, and then you could go through that process and get approved. And so when they announced the cancellation of the program, there had been 20,000 approvals under this program, 18,000 of which had gone to Chinese, and there were still 24,000 applications in the pipeline. So the Immigration Department said, enough's enough, this is no longer suitable for our purposes. So they postponed the program in January of last year. I've heard, one of my colleagues is an ex-immigration official, and I've heard gossip and rumour that there's a possibility that a variation of this program might be reintroduced again once they've worked through the backlog. It remains to be seen, but it's possible that it's there. Now I'm going to talk through it, because whilst you can't apply for this program, you can essentially you still need to have access to information, because there's an extension process that will go on for those people who still have it, and you may have clients to come back to you and say that they need your help to get their extension. But the program was basically cancelled in 2015, and the extension process, all the details are on our website. Okay, so this was the overview of the program, which I've just sort of explained in summary format. And one of the big conundrums that emerged after a few years of the existence of this program was the way that it was promoted and marketed on the mainland. You had all these agents in the mainland that were selling this program to these mainlanders, and the mainlanders looked at it from the perspective of getting a Hong Kong ID card, because that was their prism, right? So I get this get this visa, I get an ID card when it's approved, and after 7 years I can get a HKCR passport because I'll become a permanent resident. What the majority of these agents omitted to tell their clients, because they're only interested in getting the money, was that you actually, in order to get a HKCR passport, you need to become a permanent resident. In order to become a permanent resident, you need to demonstrate that during the 7 years you lived in Hong Kong ordinarily and continuously for the requisite 7 years. So the vast majority of Chinese who got this visa type never actually made the move to Hong Kong and never really lived in Hong Kong. So at the end of the 7 years, when they made their application for right of abode, the immigration department couldn't give them the right of abode because they didn't qualify, but because the purpose of the program was to hold on to their money for 7 years, and we'd held on to their money for 7 years, they needed to be able to uplift that money and do what they wanted with it without it compromising their ability to continue to live and work in Hong Kong. So they granted them unconditional stay. But unconditional stay is essentially an unconditional stay, but it's only temporary residence, and you can lose your unconditional stay if you are physically absent from Hong Kong for more than 12 months continuously. So a lot of Chinese were very upset by the fact that they couldn't go on to get HKCR passports, even though they'd invested in the program for 7 years and held Hong Kong ID cards throughout all of that time. They were able to uplift the $10 million, but they weren't able to go on to secure right of abode. And again, because they don't have right of abode, they can't get HKCR passports. So it wasn't really what they thought it was going to be. But these are the program, these are the conditions for approval. And then Jake Vanderkamp said, 12 years ago now, he looks at the economics behind this program and said, okay, well the idea is we're going to ask these guys for $10 million and they're going to give it to us, and we're going to hold it for 7 years, and we're going to be significantly benefited as a result of it. But as you can read here, it represents a complete misunderstanding of how our balance of payment system works, because in actual fact the underlying premise behind the policy was not being delivered on. Okay, so again, I've included all of these in the information because you may have to advise in terms of extensions of stay and continuing eligibility for an extension of stay, but I don't intend to spend too much more time on it. The real issue here was the removal of real property when they increased the quantum from $6.5 million to $10 million. And this was how the process worked. It'd be interesting to see if they do reinstate the program, how the process will be adjusted. But please do review that at your leisure on our websites.